Looking over the national political landscape as Sarah Palin is out there traipsing around the country on her Going Rogue tour, and even some Democrats in Congress are backpedaling on traditional progressive agenda items like health care for everybody. A lot of people are inclined to ask what the heck happened to belief in a caring government. Well, according to our next guest, the project of destroying people's faith in government was the job of a wrecking crew. Government takeover by anti-government conservatives. Thomas Frank is the author of What's the Matter with Kansas and now The Wrecking Crew, How Conservatives Ruined Government, Enriched Themselves and Beggared the Nation, just out in paperback. He was the founding editor of The Baffler. He's a contributing editor at Harper's and a weekly columnist at the Wall Street Journal. He was in here for a panel discussion recently, and we asked him to stick around for a conversation about the book. Welcome back, I should say, Thomas. Thanks for staying.
How are you doing today, Laura?
I'm doing very well. Wrecking Crew. Is there a relationship between Going Rogue and The Wrecking Crew?
Between Sarah Palin's book and The Wrecking Crew? Well, there is, in a sense, that Sarah Palin is one of these people that believes very profoundly that government can never work, that government can't help, that government can't do things right, that the market is the only sort of legitimate source of, public authority in our society, which is, of course, rubbish. The point that I want to get across about The Wrecking Crew is that conservatism, and we see this all around us now, the tea parties, the town hall meetings, whatever, conservatism believes very profoundly in government failure. Conservatism is to a certain degree about government failure. That's why government can't do your health care. That's why government can't do this, can't do that, can't regulate the financial industry because they always screw it up. Okay. So what happens when conservatives get in power? They deliver government failure. It's a fascinating thing. All the disasters after Katrina, when FEMA dropped the ball so catastrophically after Hurricane Katrina, they point to this. Conservatives now point to this 5 years down the road all the time when they're saying, look, you don't want to entrust health care to these guys. It's like, but those guys were you.
You write about the difference that exists between the conservatism you find on the bookstore shelves and the conservatism you find in the Beltway. Explain.
Well, the conservatism that you find, in books or more, in a place like Kansas. My home state I'm from Kansas. It's a red state, very conservative kind of place. It's a very populist, tradition-minded, culture war kind of conservatism. And, I'm a very liberal guy, but I don't have a huge, I disagree with that kind of conservatism, but here's the interesting thing. Those people elect all these conservative politicians. Those conservative politicians go to Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. right now still has, even though the conservatives aren't in power anymore, a huge conservative apparatus in Washington, D.C. Okay? Those people aren't interested in the culture wars. It's a completely different emphasis. It's all about something else. It's all about running the economy. It's about outsourcing government. It's about doing all these things.
So you snag the voters on the cultural stuff so that they can go and work for the folks who are listening to the lobbyists on the money stuff.
Well, that's pretty much, it's not done by design. That's just that's the way it's worked out in our, it's a fascinating country. But here's the question that really got me going with this book. I moved to D.C. in 2003. It was the brilliant summertime of the conservative movement. They had the White House, they had both houses of Congress, they had the Supreme Court. And yet, this is a movement that claims that it is always outside of power, right. Always outside looking in. They're against big government, right? They're against Washington, D.C. They call it the city of Satan, or whatever. They have all these hilarious phrases for describing Washington, D.C., and yet they're in power. Right. How do you resolve this contradiction? What does conservatism in power look like? What is conservative government?
How do you retain your aggrieved minority status?
Exactly. Well, it's fascinating. What is conservative D.C.? And it does exist. And conservatives say, no, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing. But there is, of course. It's an industry town. They exist. They live in certain suburbs rather than others. They live in this kind of house, not that kind. They work in this job, not that job. And so I started out the book by studying that phenomenon of conservative government. Who are these people? What do they do?
You found out they break government.
They wreck it.
Is there
and they get rich. That's the fascinating thing.
Is there a relationship, so much to talk to you about, but is there a relationship between the foreign policy, as you call it, Richard Nixon's war on the world, and the war on workers at home?
Those are two different sides of the same coin, I imagine. The war with the world was that was, in the early days of the Bush administration, right after 9/11, there was a book that came out. I just saw it in a thrift store shelf the other day, and it was called "An End to Evil." Do you remember this? we were gonna take them down wherever they were in the entire world. We were going to go to, and that was this very idealistic form of conservatism, the neoconservatives and that kind of thing, and they were going to remake Iraq. Forget about WMD. We're going to remake Iraq.
Were they remaking it for Walmart? Remaking it for the oil industry? Was it for? It
was going to be a free market paradise. The idea was to remake it along. Look, this is to get back to what is conservative government. The basic question here: what is conservative government? I found a quote from George W. Bush. We often think of him as a man who's kind of has a bumbling way of talking, but this is one thing that he described it very precisely. What is conservative government? I found a federal document from early on in his administration where he laid out the philosophy in one sentence. Government should be market-based. Government should be market-based. Now think about that, because government is the one thing in our society, or one of a handful of things, that isn't market-based. It's supposed to stand outside the market, referee the market, supervise the market. What happens when you say, no, government should be on a market footing? Well, you have things like Iraq, where we outsourced the war, outsourced the administration of the country, and this is, by the way, going on in Washington right up until the last minute of the Bush administration, outsourcing every imaginable federal operation to all the contractors there in D.C. And of course it's a disaster. Like FEMA was a disaster. The outsourcing of the war in Iraq, a disaster. They even outsourced the bailout of Wall Street.
We should say that the outsourcing in the military actually began under Clinton.
Oh, it goes quite a ways back, yeah. Clinton was big into outsourcing as well, but with a lot of the villains in this book were people in the Clinton administration.
What goes back to the question of marketing, of business, or government rather, as a business? To go back to that for a second, that's where the Abramoffs and everybody learned how to play that game very well.
That's right.
And when you have government as a business, but government as the market, you get the situation that you describe of democracy buried under a mountain of money.
Yes.
Lobbying, money. How do we dig ourselves out?
This is a fascinating thing that you touch on, the idea of government as a business. Conservatives always come back to this idea, even now. As we see Wall Street in a state of collapse and all these sort of things, and government totally let our team down in the last couple of years. And conservatives are saying, well, we've just got to get back to running government like a business and balancing the books and running a tight ship and all this sort of thing. Now, look, it's on the one hand
during the Bush
no,
years.
that's right. Of course, this was the NBA president. That was what George Bush was all about, was running government like a business. On the one hand, of course, we want government to have better accounting and strict bookkeeping. I mean, obviously. But on the other hand, businesses answer to the market. Okay, if government answers to the market, it means it answers to supply and demand. It answers to the call of the dollar. Okay, what is that? We call that bribery. Yeah.
and it seems to be so inset, so deeply entrenched
legalized,
in government
yes.
that you can change both houses and the White House and it still operates in the same way.
Well, look, I'm very critical of the Obama administration, but one of the things that they've done very effectively is they have cracked down on lobbying to a certain degree. I mean, you still see a lot of lobbyists calling the shots in Washington.
You don't need to lobby the Treasury Department when all your friends who are in office in the Treasury Department.
Well, this brings you to there's a number of different ways that money expresses itself in government, and one of them is lobbying. Another is what you just referred to, what they call in Washington the revolving door. And the political scientists have a term for this. They call it regulatory capture. Now, I tried to avoid using that term in The Wrecking Crew because I thought it was too abstract, too political sciencey, politically scientific, whatever.
You call it privatopia.
Yes, but that's what the book is about. It's about. The idea of regulatory capture is like this, that you have a regulatory agency, you set it up to supervise a particular industry, and over the course of time, it basically gets captured by that industry to the point where the regulators are in bed with the industry. And I looked at conservative government, and I'm like, well, this is not just a model for a particular agency, like, say, the Department of Agriculture. This is a model for the whole thing.
So what kind of a job is Obama doing turning it around?
He's done very good on, excuse me, I have a PhD. He's done very well, Laura. He's done very well in certain things. Look, the Bush crew and the Reagan crew before them were very good at wrecking, say, the Environmental Protection. They always have the same targets. The EPA, Department of the Interior, Department of Labor. Oh my God, Department of Labor. Did they ever drive that into the ground? Yeah. Securities and Exchange Commission, which is just a parking lot for loyalists, and every banking regulator. The Obama people have done, with the exception of the banking regulators, which we'll come to later, they've done a very good job in starting to turn these agencies around. Look, there's very good people in the rank and file at federal agencies. I mean, regardless of what conservatives say about the evil government bureaucrats, there's a lot of people that have basically sacrificed their lives. These are highly educated people who could be out there making a lot of money somewhere else, but they decided to go to Washington and try to do a good job for their country, and conservatives have spent the last 30 years just attacking these people, calling them vicious names, and appointing people to run these agencies whose job it is just to keep those government workers in check and make sure they don't actually do anything. Well, now they're able to do things.
Was there ever a moment where those good guys really were in control in Washington? You talk about maybe we romanticize the